So I'll go ahead and kick things off. For those that don't know me personally, my name's Dorian Cunyon. I'm an executive coach. A lot of the people that are on this call, worked for the company that I spent 21 years at. So prior to getting into executive coaching, worked with 7-Eleven, held a lot of different roles there. My last role was vice president of operations. And since leaving 7-Eleven, I've been doing some career coaching and counseling. Um, this session is about an hour long. I won't be able to give you every secret under the sun, but am looking to share some of the high level tactics and strategies that I've used with clients. And, as we go through, just ask me questions if you have them. So just a quick plug around the different businesses that I'm involved with. One is Coaching Gold. It's a podcast that I do with Dr. Rudy Jackson. It's all around leadership. If you have some time, love to have you check it out. Let me know what you think. My business is Your Path Coaching and Consulting. We provide both business coaching and career coaching. And then the primary leadership philosophy that I use is the Power Six Leader, which you can learn more about that on my website. But focusing on today, what you can expect, really want to go through tips on how to get an interview, ways to prepare for an interview, and how to use LinkedIn as a tool. Um, Over the last 2 or 3 years, as I've been working with clients, it's just blown me away on how difficult it can be to get interviews. So the tips and best practices that I'm sharing with you are ones that I've done with clients. I've seen that they've worked. And that's why I wanted to share them with you today. One kind of quick tip. If you've never used LinkedIn Sales Navigator, it's a premium service that LinkedIn has. I will be emailing everyone that signed up for this presentation, which has a link to LinkedIn Sales Navigator, where you can access it for 2 months. One of the things that I like about LinkedIn Sales Navigator is that it has access to some of the LinkedIn trainings. So some of what I'm going to tell you today, I've learned from doing some of the LinkedIn trainings. They have a lot of really good content for job seekers, both on how to do your resume, how to prep for interviews, and then also how to use LinkedIn. So if you're interested in giving it a try, follow the link and you can check it out. As far as setting the stage for today, you know, I appreciate you jumping on. You got 1 hour. Going to try to make sure I give you some really good content. Feel free to ask any questions, and your engagement is going to help this to be super effective. So I'll open it up. What are you guys looking for from today? And you can either come off of mute and say something, or you can put it in the chat. But I got a lot of information, and I really want to focus things on what's going to be of most value to you.
Hi,
Hey,
Dorian. This is Indira. How are you?
I'm doing well.
Um, so I haven't looked for a job in 10 years. So obviously a lot of, how to look for a job has changed. So I just, I guess what I want to get out of this is what do I need to do different? What do resumes look like? I know AI is rampant in everything now. How does AI play into LinkedIn and our profiles? Um, what do I need to do different to be able to market myself, so that I'm noticed amongst all of the so many different profiles in LinkedIn.
All right. I'll definitely touch on that.
hey, Dorian, it's Eric. For me, 17 years with 7-Eleven, so obviously getting back into the job market is quite different than it was 17 years ago
Yeah.
for sure. So, I just recently kind of put my open to work on LinkedIn, and got inundated with recruiters. It's like crazy, man. It's just unbelievable how many reach out. And I feel like some of them it's kind of gimmicky. They're looking to rewrite your resume, so and they pass you along to someone else who charges an insane fee to try to rewrite your resume. So obviously I know my resume and I've touched it up quite a bit. It probably needs some more work. So anything, obviously I'm pretty proficient in AI now, but just understanding how to utilize AI to help with resume writing, and then kind of what you already alluded to with utilizing LinkedIn the right way. Ultimately, I think we all want to get interviews. What's the best way to go about that? And really, who we should be working with, who we shouldn't be working with, and kind of understanding the tools around LinkedIn. I think LinkedIn's a great resource. Really allows you to connect to a lot of folks out there, a lot of executives as well as recruiters, but just understanding, kind of which path to go down is most important to me.
All right. Now that sounds good. Definitely touch on that.
And I'll jump in. This is Lauren. I don't think we've met. I also recently got laid off. I was previously at Simply Good Foods and then in the candy industry at Ferrari and Mars Wrigley. And now that I'm thinking about it, I don't think I've cold applied for a job since 2014. So a lot of things have been through connections and networks. So yeah, I think it's for me is like making sure my resume is standing out to like the AI systems. I've heard use AI, don't use AI to rewrite your resume. So
Yeah.
yeah, really getting that interview because I think, yeah, like I said, it's been about 14 years since I've had, or 12 years since I've had to like cold and go through like a true interviewing like platform system.
Okay.
Last but not least, I'm Peter Velez. I was with the company for 10 years, and I'm really interested in finding out about those job applying AI systems that are available to see if those are something that we should be using, and want to see if I can find a reliable company that can critique my resume so I can have a resume that goes through the ATS system and it's calling out for interviews.
Okay. No, that's a good start. And I'll just share a couple things before I jump into the presentation. One, there are a lot of resume writers out there. There's actually certifications around resume writing. So if you elect to have somebody write your resume, there's three things I would suggest. One, um, ask them for referrals. You want to know who they've worked with, and then you can actually speak to them and get some feedback on like how they did. That's super helpful. Two, I would talk to with any service that you're doing, whether it's resume writing or if you're going to work with a career coach or anybody, I would talk to at least three people, just so you can compare and contrast. I have clients that I've worked with in the past that have spent $1,000 on their resume only to not get interviews and then spend another $1,000 to not get interviews. So, resume writing is a skill. It's something that a lot of people claim that they do, but not a whole lot of people actually have like a high level of expertise on. So, I would just be cautious on like paying a whole lot of money if you don't have a really good referral. With that said, if you've gone to a university, um, I encourage you to reach back out to that university and ask them what type of job placement services that they have. There's a lot of colleges and universities that will provide like free resume reviews and different things. And I always tell people take advantage of free as much as you can. So definitely, check out if you went to a university, do they have things for alumni? And then with recruiters, there's a lot of different recruiters out there. A lot of people will present themselves as recruiters. What I would say is that if somebody works for like an actual placement firm, um, they could be a good person to interact with. I'll use an example. Rob Hurt used to work for me at 7-Eleven. He's now with, I think it's called Thompson Haskell or Haskell Thompson. It's one of the two names. And he's placed a lot of people in my networking jobs. So if somebody, if you're looking to stay within like the C-store industry, there's recruiters that specifically work inside of that industry. I've spoken to a couple people that have gotten packages from 7-Eleven where they get connected with an outplacement firm. I'd encourage you, like, take advantage of that outplacement firm. They have a lot of connections. They have a lot of resources. They can point you in the right direction. Be skeptical of some of these recruiters that are just, you know, freelance. There's a lot of what I would say, I won't call them scammers, but they're definitely more focused on trying to get money than helping people. And you know, once you've been laid off, you're kind of vulnerable. A lot of times you're a little bit depressed, you're not as connected. There's a lot of people that prey on individuals that are going through this transition. So just be mindful and just make sure that if you are paying somebody for something, that you have some validation that they actually have had some success doing what they're doing. With that said, unless there's some questions, I'll go ahead and jump into the presentation.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
Is it recommended, or do usually just recruiters work off of what the company pays them? We don't have to pay them, do we?
Yeah, in most situations, the recruiter gets compensated by the company. So they get hired to do the work. So if there's somebody that is saying, you know, you pay me some money and I'll find you a job, um, I would ask a whole lot of questions because a lot of the companies that I've worked with that have been trying to trying to hire people, they'll pay recruiters. They normally don't expect for a pay to play, and that could be an early sign that you're involved with um, I don't know, an industry or something that's a little bit suspicious. If a recruiter is saying, "Hey, you need to pay me this much money, and then I'll get you a job."
All right, thanks.
All right. All right. So when I left 7-Eleven, the training program that I went through was the coactive coaching, and one of the things that it talks about in coactive is like finding the balance between doing and being. So as you're applying for jobs, as you're doing all this stuff, there's a checklist of things that you need to be doing. At the same time, I encourage you to kind of pause and just think about like how do you need to do those things? And confidence is just immensely important as you're going through through this process. Being confident and understanding your self-worth is going to influence, you know, your motivation to rewrite your resume, your motivation to reach out to prior colleagues, everything that you need to do in order to find this next opportunity. So if you're feeling less than confident, dedicate some time to just figuring out how you can get your confidence back. And there's a whole lot of things I can talk to you about regarding that at another time. That's something that you need some help with. But finding your confidence, reminding yourself of like all the successes and the wins that you've had over your career, and that companies would be fortunate to have you, is just going to make every step in this process so much easier. Um, One little thought about AI, I would feel irresponsible if I didn't talk about this. AI is a tool, and I'll call out that it can be dangerous. Um, I'm involved in the mental health industry. I'm the co-owner of a mental health practice, and we have therapists that work with a lot of people that have developed unhealthy relationships with AI. Um, AI, if you're using it as a tool, is great. If you're using it as like a therapist or as a friend, it has a little bit of risk. So I just layer that little bit of caution. Ways that I encourage people to use AI: if you're doing research on a company, if you're doing research on a job, is great. It's awesome for summarizing things. It's awesome for helping you come up with ideas. There is a little bit of risk when you're using AI that it makes you think that something is really good when it really isn't. So I always encourage people I'm working with to set like time limits where, hey, you're working on something for an hour, you're getting up, walking away, just to have a little bit of pattern interruption so that you don't find yourself, you know, working on something and getting distracted and feeling like you're making a lot of good progress, but then realizing, hey, this is really off the reservation and not as good as I thought. Now, just transitioning into really starting to think about you're on LinkedIn and you're looking at a job, you know, what are a couple of steps that you should take in the process? So, one thing, and we've already talked about this, AI has made it super easy to apply for jobs. So, as Peter mentioned, there are websites that you can sign up for, and they'll just scan the internet and they'll apply for jobs. Um, I've heard various levels of success with this. It's not a tactic that I endorse, but I think understanding that those things are out there can help you to understand why it's so hard for recruiters. Because, 10 years ago, if you were a recruiter, you were probably getting 15, maybe 50 applications for a job. I've seen jobs on LinkedIn where there's been over 500 people that have applied. And when you have that many people applying, there's no recruiter that's taking the time to read through all of those things. They're using applicant tracking software to scan those resumes to identify which resumes they're actually going to review. And understanding that can help you to move slow enough for the jobs that you really care about applying for, and like tweaking your resume so that there's a higher chance that an actual human reviews your resume. So whenever I'm talking to people, I talk about like the first step in the process is to get the interview. And that's what we're going to talk about primarily today, how to adjust your resume just so that you get an interview. And then once you get that interview, you do need to make sure your resume is set up in a way that's actually useful and helpful for you throughout the rest of the process. So we'll discuss, how do you start with the end in mind? And before I kind of go into my tips, if you had a friend and they were going to apply for like this senior operations manager role, what's some guidance or tips that you would give them for, preparing to apply for this job?
Well, the first thing would be to verify the qualifications that are there so you can adjust on your resume some of those so that it'll go through that tracking system.
Yep.
And also seeing the type of level candidates that are in there. If you possibly were higher than the ones that have been applying, you have a better chance, I would assume. Mm. And seeing the education of everybody that applied to see if you're up to date with that. Because I've been seeing a lot of jobs that the education level has been master's degrees almost in everything that I've been seeing.
Yeah.
And that's that's not what I have.
So a few thoughts on what you shared there, and everything you said is absolutely right. Uh, with premium, you can see all of this information. If you don't have premium, I think it's a little sporadic on what information you can see. Um, with a lot of employers, there's a term called overemployment. So overemployment happens when somebody's way too qualified for a job, and there's a little bit of fear and anxiety that if you brought this individual in, that they would leave pretty quickly, and it creates challenges when you're in the job search for a couple of reasons. One, if you're an individual that is viewed as overemployed, you're going to get very frustrated because you're going to apply for jobs that you feel like you're perfectly qualified to do, but you might not get an interview because the person on the other side just feels like you would get the job and get bored and would leave pretty quickly. So I say that from the standpoint that as you're applying for jobs, if you don't get callbacks, it might not be because you're under, the standard. It might be that you're perceived as being overqualified. And we can kind of talk about like what you do to kind of get around that. Um, separately, uh, there's a lot of jobs where education is not a hurdle or a barrier. As you talk to employees within a company, as you research, as you look at job descriptions, you can get a better idea of what are jobs that you definitely have to have a master's degree for, and what are ones that you don't have to have a master's degree. But the more you do research, the easier it's going to be for you to understand, hey, this is a company that even without a bachelor's degree, I could get a job versus this is one where education is really prized. Any other guidance or thoughts that you would share for a friend?
Maybe start like seeing if you know anyone connected to, well, obviously Amazon's a big company, but at Amazon or like maybe something in a similar like type of role or similar department.
That is a huge one, and that's one thing that LinkedIn helps with. Um, you can pull some information. I'll show you how to pull it so you can kind of see everyone that you're connected to and where they work. So I'll always encourage, regardless of like what role somebody has in a company, if you know somebody that works in the company, reaching out and talking to them. But then also looking at people that have similar roles, maybe in other companies, because generally, like the titles and the names that are on roles are very similar. So talking to somebody in another industry may help you with both adjusting your resume and then if you actually get an interview, getting through the interview process. Any other guidance before we go forward? All right. So from a leveraging the network, one of the things that in LinkedIn Premium, it will always show this, and it says like these are the people that work for this company. Um, the nice thing it also does is that if you went to college, it will give you alumni that also went to the that work at the company. I've had clients that have had some really good success reaching out to alumni saying, hey, we both went to the school. I'm interested in the company. So as you're doing what I would say is cold outreach, which would be outreach to someone that you don't know at all, finding some commonalities like, we both went to the same school or we both worked for the same company at some point, can be a little bit easier for getting some networking conversations than reaching out to people that you don't know at all. With that said, um, you'd be surprised how many people, when you reach out to them and just, hey, I'm interested in the company, wondering if you have 5 or 10 minutes for a conversation. If you send 10 of those messages, you'll typically get one or two people that will respond, and that can help you get more information than if you don't do anything at all. So if you're having a lot of struggles with your job search, one of the things that I really encourage people to do is you always want to start with reaching out to people you know, but then also being willing to reach out to people that you don't know. A couple of things that I've observed from both talking to other career coaches and then just with my clients, the majority of jobs are filled through networking. Um, it's unfortunate, but it's just the reality that because there's so much inundation of people applying, if you know somebody within a company and they can help to say to a recruiter, hey, my friend applied, can you check on the application? It helps out a lot. It also helps from a making sure that your resume is prepared properly because if you talk to somebody within the company, they can share different insights and things that can help you as you're doing the resume. Uh, Company insiders can help you through the process. So, the first step is to get the interview, but then the second step is to do well during the interview. So the more that you can know about the company, the easier it's going to be. And then the third thing around leveraging your network, a lot of the clients that I've worked with, and it's probably a little bit biased because these are individuals that reached out and were, paying for coaching services. Uh, their mood was really down. They were depressed. They were struggling. They were questioning their self-worth. And just these conversations of talking to people that they used to work with, just always seems to like boost their motivation and their self-worth. So if you're feeling a little bit down, taking the time to just reconnect with people, you'll be surprised on the positive impacts will have on just your mood and then also positioning you in your job search. So now let's talk about the resume. So from a job description standpoint, one of the things that I like to do is to take the job description and to put it into AI and to start asking questions. And the distinction that I'll make is that as you're applying for jobs, there are going to be some jobs that typically I encourage people to set a goal on how many jobs they're applying for. I ask them to set a goal as far as how much time they're dedicating to the job search process. And typically I encourage people, you know, 4 hours a day, 4 days a week. This will help you to like not get burnt out and do a good job with the whole application process. And then inside of that, setting a goal for maybe applying to 5 jobs a day. So if you're doing that, that's 20 jobs in a week over the course of a month. That's getting you to around 80 jobs. With a lot of the clients that I work with, if they're taking this kind of slower approach of not applying to more than 5 jobs a day, they tend to have better success than individuals that are just applying to a lot of jobs, but not doing any research, not doing any adjustments, and they're just, I call it spraying and praying. Applying a whole lot tends not to be as successful with the people that I've worked with. So I'd encourage like just establish your process of identifying these are the jobs I really care about. These are the ones I want to put some effort into. And then there's nothing wrong with just hitting the easy apply every once in a while because sometimes you get lucky. But if you take the time to really research the job and adjust your resume, one prompt that you can use is you copy the job description and you ask who would be a good candidate for you for this job. And it's going to say, a multi-level leader, someone with strong lean process improvement. Like you can kind of read. And the thing to understand, especially with large companies, is that when these job descriptions are being made, that there's a professional that their primary job is to sit down with a leader, understand what type of person they're looking for, and to try to put that into words so that when people are applying, they can train the AI system to identify who would be a good fit and then present this. So this is a little bit of reverse engineering. When somebody wrote this job description, what was likely the type of person that they were looking for? And I'll tell you that this isn't 100% perfect. It's directionally correct. I've seen it work a lot of different ways. And give it a try with whatever your favorite AI system is. So now we've kind of determined, yes, we took the job description, we asked AI what type of person, we think that we're a good person for it. We want to make sure that we have set our resume up for success. So your resume should have a very clear story. You want to make sure it has impactful bullet points. You want to make sure that it's clean and scannable. So that's easier said than understood. There's a lot of different software out there that will make your resume really pretty. You can include your picture on it. It can do all this crazy things with the fonts. The more done up your resume is, the harder it is sometimes for AI systems to scan it. There's a tool called Resume Worded that I use with clients where you can actually load your resume and it will give a score. And it will tell you if like the scannability is off. So using some of these different websites to get feedback on your resume can be super helpful. Resume Worded has a free version and they have a paid version. Always encourage people like use the free version. I'll tell you like a workaround for the paid, but if you have the dollars and you want the paid is really good and makes things really easy. Strategic use of keywords. One of the things that these ATS systems are looking for are specific words. And I'll use the example of it said lean. So lean is a type of project management. So potentially the ATS system could rate you kind of high if you had project management experience, but even higher if you specifically had the word lean. So you can use AI to help you identify like what are some of these keywords, and then where it makes sense and is authentic, incorporating those keywords into your resume. And then the last thing is you want to make sure that your resume shows evidence of growth. So generally, you start early in your career and then you get promotions and you get extra responsibility. You want to make sure that your resume is showing evidence of growth. I'll pause here before I go forward just to see if there's any questions so far. All right, hearing none, I'll keep going. All right. So we get into like a clear story, and a lot of this is directly from the work that I've done with clients inside a resume worded. I would say last year I probably reviewed maybe 50 resumes with clients, and typically the client would start off with a score around 50 from resume worded. And then what I always tell them, if we can get the score up to around 80, it significantly increases the amount of interviews that you have. So a lot of what we're going to talk about are, what are ways that from an ATS standpoint, you can increase the score of your general resume. I'll also say that as you're working on your resume, and I have a slide later that says this, you want to have one just base resume that I would say is your generic resume that's probably pretty good for any job that you apply for. In addition to that, as you start to narrow in on specific jobs that you're consistently applying for, you want to develop maybe two or three additional resumes that are already pre-formatted for specific roles. And that's just going to make it easier for when you're applying for different roles. It's like, okay, this is an operations role, so this is the information. That's different than a marketing role where my experiences are the same, but I might want to highlight different parts of my experiences. So just templating your resumes where it's like there's three types of jobs I'm applying for. I have three primary resumes can save you a lot of time and really help with efficiency. So a couple of things that you want to make sure that your resume has, quantifiable and transferable accomplishments. So numbers, numbers, numbers. Uh, People outside of the company that you work for don't necessarily understand the scope or complexity of your job. Numbers help with that. Example on this one is around divested 50 stores. So if it just said divested stores, is that one store? Is it 200? By adding that number, it gives a little bit more context for like what's the size and impact of the work that you were doing. Uh, Another thing that you want to make sure is verbs. These ATS systems like verbs because they want to know what actions did you do. So as you're building your bullet points, like check it. Do I have a verb? Am I providing context? And is there a result? Like whenever you can have those three, that's a really strong bullet point, and you're putting yourself in a good situation. As you're thinking about different metrics to include under different jobs, uh, the team size that you were working with, the budget, any type of efficiency gains. Efficiency is one of those things that's pretty universal. Every company is trying to figure out how do we get more out of fewer resources. So anytime you can talk about any type of efficiency improvements, you want to have that in there. Error reduction is also something that's very transferable. If, I'll use 7-Eleven example as far as write-offs. If you had some type of success with reducing waste, having that built in is a great talking point that just shows, attention to detail, influence, and a whole lot of different skills. If you've been in a position where you're responsible for training and developing people, talking about that can be super helpful. And then safety and compliance. So these are just a couple things that across different companies just about everybody cares about. And really, as you were developing your bullet points, thinking about it from that standpoint, as far as what's something that I learned or something that I accomplished in my prior company that another company would be super excited to see and have somebody on their team with that experience. So just a couple of final thoughts around the resume. With AI, there's really very little excuse for having what I would say are unforced errors with your resume. Um, you can put your resume into the tool and ask it, you know, set this up so there's consistent formatting. You want to make sure the font sizes are the same, the indents are the same, and all of those things. You can ask it to check for jargon, to make sure that you're using language that is going to be like universally understood. Um, CDC means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So taking the time to like, break things down and really make sure people can understand some of the terms that you're using, super important in your resume. Spelling errors, AI can help with that. One thing that's really common, and it took me a little bit of while to kind of realize and understand as I was working with people, is around weak verbs. So when you say something like, I worked for this company, it doesn't tell a whole lot about what you did. So, like looking out for words that are just kind of bland and universal that don't provide a lot of context, we want to pull those out as much as possible. Leading a team, analyzing data, uh, these are stronger verbs that are more likely to be some of the key words that the ATS system is looking for. So, as much as possible, trying to identify like what are some of these verbs that are in the job description and trying to incorporate them in your resume can be super helpful. So, kind of talked about some of these other things. Um, One last call out is as you have the job description, you can put in this AI prompt, and this AI prompt is what keywords are in this job description that I should try to have in my resume. And you'll get a list of keywords. And for this exercise, I use Copilot. I primarily use Gemini, but you can use any system that you want. And it's going to tell you, like, these are some of the keywords. You don't have to have all of these keywords in your resume. And you don't want to have it if it doesn't line up with what you actually, your experience and what you do. But if you can increase these, it is going to kind of help your score get up. And we just have to get to that kind of 80% mark. We don't have to be 100% of what the job description is asking for. But the closer that you can get, every little tick tock helps you get closer to getting that interview. So, any questions about anything that I've covered so far?
I have a I don't know if this goes what you're covered, but
Yeah,
I'm sure many of us have long careers,
yeah,
multiple positions.
yeah,
How far back should we go? Number one,
yeah,
and how long should our resumes be at this point
yeah,
when we're talking like a 20-year career?
yeah. So, based off the people that are on this call, because we don't have any young professionals and people that have only worked for like 5 years, I would say that it's perfectly normal for someone that's been working for 15 to 20 years to have a two-page resume. If you get beyond 2 pages, then you really need to ask yourself, like, how much value am I giving in this additional information? So that's one call out. The second one is that each section in your resume does not need to carry the same amount of space. So your last job more than likely demonstrates a better representation of your skill sets than the first job that you had. So that section potentially should be a little bit larger than some of the ones as you go down. And where the variability comes into play is that let's say that your last role was in operations, but prior to that you were in a merchandising role, and then prior to that an operations role. if you're applying for an operations role, then like each one should be like a little bit shorter. But if you're applying for a merchandising role, that merchandising section may be as big, if not a little bit bigger than your last role, just because you want to make sure that you're highlighting, hey, I have really strong merchandising experience. This is what I learned in that role. And as somebody is looking at the resume, you want them to spend more time thinking and consuming information related to the things that are most applicable to the job that you're applying to. With the very early career jobs, you could just have the title and one or two bullet points if you feel like it adds value in context to who you are and makes you like a better candidate. But if you go back and you look at it and it's like, I think about myself. My first role was a store leader. And for the longest time, I had store leader on there. And then I was a field consultant. And I can't say that there's a whole lot of skills that I developed as a store leader that I didn't use as a field consultant. So leave the store leader on there from the standpoint of the time, just to kind of show, hey, I've got this many years of experience, but you don't need a whole lot of meat there because a lot of the skills and the things that were doing are covered in some of your other jobs. Is that helpful?
Very helpful. Thank you.
Any other questions? So everything I've talked about is really designed to help you get the interview. And when I say get the interview, the first step is I have to get past the ATS system. So that means that without any type of emotions or any other things, that my resume has enough of these words that the AI system is looking for, that it gets me in front of a recruiter. So a recruiter is actually looking at my resume. So then, once the recruiter's looking at it, your resume actually has to make sense. So um, this is where sharing your resume with others can be helpful. This is where like using AI in your own judgment to make sure that a human would actually want to read your resume is super important. And what I encourage people to do is to really look at their resume as a script for their interview. What I found is whenever I've given people this prompt, it's like when you're sitting down in your front of somebody and they ask you a question, if you can design your resume so that you can look down at it and it can remind you of what you want to say in the moment, then it serves two purposes. One, you've written it in a way that it has good stories in there that somebody's actually going to care about reading. And then when you're actually in front of them, because they've looked at your resume, they were interested in the stories, they're going to ask you for more details. You're going to have those details because like all you're doing is putting the bullet points relating to that story. You're just providing like a high level overview of this is what I did professionally, and it's almost like the cover of a book. So we got the cover of the book, somebody actually opens it up in the interview, and then you're going to go into more details around the story. So as you're kind of working with your resume, uh, what I'd encourage is like, let's make sure that the bullet points that you have on your resume are linked to a story that you want to talk about and be prepared to talk about them. So I'm going to share an exercise that I tend to give clients for like updating their resume. So every day for the next 10 days, you can at whatever time makes a sense for you, maybe first thing in the morning or after lunch or before you go to bed, thinking about like a success story. Like, oh, I remember when we rolled out, hot foods and, I was number one at that. Or, I remember when we rolled out this new candy and like we I was involved with the marketing and did a great job. Whatever the story is, but like write the story. And after you write the story, this is something that you can log into an AI tool and say, convert this into a bullet point that I can put in my resume. If you're comfortable with it, put it in your resume. Then, like after the 10 days and you've got your 10 bullet points that line up with your resume, I want you to just practice telling these stories until you're comfortable with. So you could tell the story to a friend, a family member. If you decide to hire a coach, you could talk to a coach. One thing I encourage a lot of people to do if they're struggling with interviews and they're trying to get better is to actually get out their phone, record themselves answering some of these questions that are going to come up from during an interview or practicing their stories. But just practicing, because the more that you just kind of talk about these things, the easier it's going to be when you're sitting in front of a hiring manager to talk about it. The one last thing that I'll say is um, I've been really blown away with how talking to AI about some of your stories can help you to refine it and dial it down and make it more compelling. So if you're feeling really stuck and you're like looking for ways to like be more concise or to tell a better story, open up, whatever AI tool you like to use, tell the story and say the story back to me, but I want you to summarize it. And if you do that 2 or 3 times, I think you'll be surprised on like how much better you can tell the story with the help of the tool talking back to you. Has anybody tried that last part as far as using AI and talking to it and trying to help it help you summarize information?
I have not, but that sounds really helpful.
Yep.
I've used it a little bit when I've been applying for jobs that are maybe more adjacent to what I've done, and it's kind of given me so like I've done a lot of like sales strategy and like kind of customer adjacent, but when I was applying for a more like direct sales job, they were taking some of the things from my resume and what I've done to the job description and like kind of showing like, hey, here's some things you could spin into that. So I thought that was helpful for me to like prepare for an interview.
Yeah, I think that those type of use cases are super helpful. And, one thing, because most of us have been around senior leaders enough, and there's some people that care about us that if we've reached out and said, hey, I'm prepping for this interview, this is a little bit of a stretch. Would you mind giving me 10 or 15 minutes of like listening to me talk about like my talking points and giving me feedback? I always like to validate AI suggested this. I actually went to a human that I trust and they gave me this feedback. And, the convergence of the two generally help you land in a good place. Now, as far as LinkedIn and just some things that can help you a bunch. And so for some context of um, why why I know this. When I was with 7-Eleven for 4 years, I was responsible for franchise marketing and recruiting. And the people that we brought onto the team were recruiters. So like I worked directly with recruiters during the early days of people using LinkedIn. And the best practices that we were using then are still the practices that people use now. And it's validated also if you go through some of the LinkedIn training. So like these are like really, really sound principles. Um, your picture, like if you have a picture on your LinkedIn profile, like you're going to get more views than if you don't. So you want to have a picture. A professional picture is like even better. If you go through the LinkedIn training, it will say don't have a selfie. Um, you don't have to spend a whole lot of money, but you do want to make sure that you have somebody else take the picture so that it looks good and all those things from a lighting standpoint. So you want to have a good picture. I don't know Jim Lee. I just grabbed him as an example. If Jim Lee was coming to me and he was like, I have not been able to get any jobs, I'm going to talk to him about, okay, we want to make sure that you are very searchable, that if a recruiter is looking for someone like you, that you're making it as easy as possible. So he's got his name, he's got his title, he has that he works at Wawa. That's all good information. Uh, when a recruiter is searching, whatever words that they're searching for, if you have it in your headline, you're more likely to come up in their search. So if I was working with Lee and I see that he's a military veteran, I would ask him, hey, put veteran in there. Because if somebody's specifically looking for somebody that's a veteran, then you're going to come up in the search. Um, Retail executive. So that's great that when you were at Wawa, you were the director of operations. Well, with the jobs that you're applying for, some of them might be vice president roles, some of them might be manager roles, some of them might be director. If I'm a recruiter and I'm doing a search, I'm putting in a specific word and I'm getting a specific output. So if you 100% are only looking for director of operation roles, stick with that. If what you're actually looking for is retail executive roles, then let's put that in the search because then like who's going to be looking for you and who's going to find you is going to be a little bit more broad. And I always equate it to if you were on Amazon and you're doing an Amazon search, this kind of works the same way. It brings up exactly the words that people are looking for. And then I was looking at his experience. It looks like he had some experience with business acquisition. It's like, let's put that in there. So if somebody was looking for an expert with acquisitions, you're coming up. So as you're going through your resume and as you're thinking about the jobs that you're applying for, playing around with your headline and adjusting what words are there can help you be visible to different people. And then within your LinkedIn analytics, there's actually information that can show you how many people have viewed. And I always encourage, like, let's treat this like a four step. Got the current situation last week, 50 people viewed our profile. We're going to make these changes. We're going to see how many people view it the next week. If it drops to 25, we made a bad move. Let's change it back to what it was. If it jumps to 75, then potentially we made a good change and we know that we might be on to something. But, you know, doing little tests and changing like your profile and some of this other information and then just seeing what impact it has on your views is just a really good best practice. I always encourage people to have the banners. The banners can tell people a lot about you. Since this guy's from Philadelphia, one thing he could have is like a picture of like Philly. But like whatever like represents you, and as somebody's going through a whole lot of different profiles, like if there's something that could stick to make somebody spend a couple more seconds on your profile and better understand who you are, then, add that as your banner. And that's going to be better than just having, nothing there. Other tips and best practices, when you're working full time and you're committed to your company, you're probably not connecting with a lot of people on LinkedIn. There's probably a lot of people that you know that you're not connected to. Take some time and just connect with people because the more people that you're connected to, just the better for a multitude of reasons. We're getting short on time, so I won't go through all of them, but like it's super helpful. Ask and give endorsements. So recruiters are going to be like looking for what skills you have, what endorsements you have. It can feel awkward sometimes asking somebody to do an endorsement, but I've had a lot of clients have success by giving endorsement to others, and then there's this feeling of reciprocity that happens where they'll turn around and give an endorsement to you. So I encourage that. And then just make sure that you've updated your work experience because what some recruiters are going to do is they're going to get your resume and then they're going to look at your profile and there should be some congruence between the two. They don't have to exactly mirror each other, but they, you know, if you have work experience on your resume, you want to have it on your LinkedIn and vice versa. The last call out is there's a lot of elements inside of your profile. Each one of those can increase the amount that you come up in a search. So, for example, volunteer experience. You might not have that on there, but someone knowing that you volunteered at the Boys and Girls Club or someplace else provides a point of connectivity. It gives a little bit more of an understanding of who you are. So if you have the time, fill out the profile and it will help with the your searchability. Along those lines, everything that's in your profile can actually be converted into a PDF. So a lot of times, one of the first things I'll do with a client when I'm working with them is like convert their profile into the PDF, and so that they can see if a recruiter pulled this up, what is on there. So that can be like a good checkpoint to make sure that the information that you want on your profile is there. And then last little bit of guidance, and this kind of circles back to connecting all the data that you have on LinkedIn, you can actually request. So if you go into your settings and you go into data permission, you can ask them to send you everyone that you're connected with. And what's really cool about this is when I'm working with clients, I encourage them to use this as their outreach plan. So you can, get this, Excel document. It's going to show you who you're connected to, where they work, what their title is, and that can be your guide as far as, hey, I'd like to work for Wells Fargo. I can see that this person works for Wells Fargo. They're a vice president. I'm going to try to reach out and see if I can get a meeting with them. So, as you're developing your outreach and networking plans, this is a really helpful tool. So, that's what I have for today. As I said, I'll email this deck to everyone that's on the call. Um, any questions that you have in the final moments of this call?
No questions, Dorian, but appreciate you kind of going through that. It's definitely a lot of good insights there we can certainly use. And I already actually ran my resume through the Word it too as we were talking. So
Okay.
yeah. So appreciate it. Thank you very much.
No, you're welcome. If you have any questions, shoot me an email or a note. There are some recruiters that I know also, so reach out to me if you're looking for any connections from that standpoint.
Well, yes, super helpful. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.
All right. Well, I appreciate y'all joining, and just reach out if there's anything else I can do to help.
Thank you.